They say a mother's love is unconditional. That motherhood is the purest form of selflessness. But no one talks about the silence of disappointment, the sharp sound of a door closing behind you, after your own son tells you to leave. My name is Margaret Lowell. I'm 58 years old. My hands are calloused from years of housework, and my heart carries invisible scars. For 3 decades, I lived for one purpose: to give my son, Henry, a better life than the one I had. I sacrificed my youth, my marriage, my dreams, all in his name. And yet, all it took was me saying I lost my job for him to look me straight in the eye and say, "You're nothing but a useless burden." That was the exact moment something inside me shattered. But it was also the moment I began to rise. It was early autumn when it all happened. The crisp breeze of Boston already carried the scent of dry leaves, and the first orange rays of sunset poured through the windows of the house I shared with Henry and his wife, Clara. I had just returned from the mansion where I worked as a housekeeper for nearly 17 years. My employer, Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore, had passed away a few months earlier, and with her gone, that place and my daily life lost all meaning. "Henry, I need to talk to you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady but gentle. He dropped the remote with an annoyed snap, furrowing his brow as if my mere interruption was some kind of offense. "What is it now, Mom?" he asked, already irritated. I'm no longer working for Mrs. Whitmore. What?" He shot up from the couch. "You're kidding, right? That job paid $8,000 a month. What are you going to do now? Just sit around and eat on our dime?" The room fell silent for a moment. Even Clara, sitting next to him, looked away like she didn't want to get involved. But the second I tried to explain that it wasn't entirely my decision, she chimed in, her voice cold and clipped. "With all due respect, Margaret, someone your age and with your background really shouldn't be walking away from that kind of stability." Those words, laced with pity and superiority, cut deeper than any shout could. I looked at both of them, feeling an old, familiar ache rise in my throat. It was the same ache I felt years ago, when I gave up my own happiness to keep that household afloat, while they built theirs on the back of my sacrifice. But what they didn't know was that Evelyn, my former employer, had left me an inheritance, not a few thousand, not some modest savings, a fully legal trust fund worth $8 million. A quiet act of gratitude for all those years I was more than a housekeeper. I was her companion, her confidant, almost a daughter. And that night, sitting in that living room where I no longer belonged, I realized they thought they had discarded me, that I was invisible, just another aging woman with no value, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. If stories like this speak to you, stories of women rising again, of rediscovery after heartbreak, subscribe to our channel. Here, we honor the quiet strength that rises from the ashes. I didn't sleep that night. The ceiling felt farther away than ever, and even wrapped in my thick blanket, I felt a coldness that came from inside, a chill that had nothing to do with Boston's wind, but with the emptiness of realizing you've become disposable. The silence of the night was broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the living room wall. Each tick was an accusation, a cruel reminder. You gave your life to someone who never once saw you as a whole person. I got up early, like I always did, made coffee like I always did. But for the first time in decades, I didn't serve anyone. I drank the first cup with trembling hands, letting the strong aroma fill the kitchen, now filled with a new kind of silence. Not peace, but an ending. When Henry and Clara came downstairs, they looked right past me. No good morning, no nod. She opened a yogurt. He scrolled through his phone. And me. I said nothing. Then Clara broke the silence. "About yesterday. If you're really not working anymore, we'll need to restructure the household expenses." Her voice was sweet, but each word carried venom masked as concern. My mom, Susan, knows an agency that places companions for wealthy retired gentlemen, she continued, as if suggesting I sell cookies at the farmer's market. They pay well, provide housing, meals, and with your housekeeping background, it shouldn't be hard. My stomach twisted. The spoon I was holding clattered onto the table with a sharp thud. You want me to go live with some rich old man? I asked, trying not to gag. Oh, come on, Mom, Henry said, raising his eyebrows. It's not like you haven't done something similar before. This wouldn't be anything new. I looked into his eyes, searching for even a trace of the boy I once raised, the one who cried in the dark, who begged for comfort after nightmares. But all I saw was a cold, calculating man with eyes too tired to feel shame. What do you think? I am? I whispered. An endless source of labor? A walking paycheck? Don't be dramatic, Clara said, crossing her arms. We're just asking you to contribute. You're still in good shape. It's not time to start playing the victim. Right then, something inside me broke, but it wasn't pain, it was freedom. I was no longer a mother. I was a maid, a cook, a nurse, and now, apparently, a potential companion for hire to offset the cost. I stood up slowly. The floor felt shaky beneath me, like the whole house was trembling with me. I'm leaving, today, and I'm not coming back. What? Henry stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You think I depend on you, that I have nowhere else to go, but you're wrong. Clara let out a laugh, sharp and mocking. Oh, Margaret, please, where are you going to go? A hotel? A nursing home? That was the last time anyone spoke to me with such disdain. I looked around the kitchen, the wooden table stained with tea burns, the chairs I had reupholstered myself, the vase in the corner holding dried flowers. Every object was a testament to my presence, my effort, what I was, and what they never appreciated. You'll regret this, I said softly. Not because I wish you harm, but because you just lost the only person who still saw you with love. And before the pain could drown me again, I walked upstairs, packed my suitcase, and came down with my head held high. What they didn't know is that a wounded woman can become the most powerful force on earth. I walked out of that house with my blue suitcase, the same one I carried when I first moved to Boston 25 years ago. But this time, it held more than just clothes. Tucked between wool sweaters and worn underwear were all my heartaches, folded neatly like delicate linens. The wheels creaked along the cracked sidewalks of the neighborhood, and each step felt heavier than the last. And yet, there was something unfamiliar stirring in me, a bitter sort of lightness, like someone who finally accepts they've lost everything, and in doing so, finds the freedom to start from nothing. I went straight to a modest hotel downtown. The room smelled of disinfectant and loneliness, but when I shut the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. No one was waiting for me to pour coffee or scrub a dish. I was alone, truly alone, but strangely at peace. And there, in that muffled silence, I reached into the bottom of my suitcase and pulled out a brown envelope. Inside was a copy of Evelyn Whitmore's will, signed in her elegant, confident handwriting. My name was written there with warmth, with gratitude, with love. To Margaret Lowell, a woman of rare integrity, generous spirit, and tireless heart. You were not just my housekeeper, you were my family. The number listed at the bottom of the page made my breath catch. $8,300,000. Already transferred, already in my name, already mine. I sat at the edge of the bed, stunned. I remember staring at my hands for a long time. Hands worn down, veins raised, nails short from years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes. Hands that raised a boy. That served families who never looked me in the eye. And now, the hands of a wealthy woman. But what kind of wealth was this, if my own son saw me as disposable? If the woman who saw me as family now rested beneath cold marble, far from the city's noise? Yes, I could buy a new house. I could hire a driver, a nurse, even a cook if I wanted to. But what I truly longed for was to disappear from the eyes of those who only ever saw me as a stepping stone. That same night, I booked a suite at the most expensive hotel in Beacon Hill, not out of vanity, but because I deserved to sleep without fear, because I deserved clean sheets I didn't have to wash, because I needed to prove to myself, and only to myself, that my worth was never tied to a paycheck, but to the quiet dignity I carried in every act of service. The next morning, the phone rang. I recognized Clara's voice immediately, sweet, rehearsed. "Margaret, we need to talk." I smiled. "About what?" "Henry. He's sorry. He just got overwhelmed. It was all a big misunderstanding." Let a few seconds of silence pass, letting her hear my calm, steady breathing on the other end. "Clara, tell him I'm fine." And this time, I was the one who chose to leave. "But what about the house? The mortgage is due next month. And you've always helped us." The word "always" hung in the air like a soft slap. It was true. I always helped. Well, now it's time for you two to learn how to help yourselves. I hung up before she could say another word. Then I sat down in the armchair by the window and watched the city come to life. Cars rushing. By distant honking, the smell of fresh coffee wafting from a nearby bakery. For the first time in decades, no one needed me. And that hurt, but it also set me free. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. The number on the screen looked like a mirage, 8,325,000. I stared at it as if I were staring at a new identity. That amount wasn't just money. It was the sum of every silent tear cried in a locked bathroom, every sleepless night, every unrecognized sacrifice. And now? What would I do with all of it? The answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. No one else would decide my fate ever again. A few days later, I walked into a high-end real estate agency. The lobby was lined with beige marble, floor-to-ceiling windows, pouring light. Over pale wood panels and white orchid arrangements, a space clearly designed to impress. A gentle mix of lavender and fresh coffee lingered in the air, a world away from the stuffy rooms where I had spent half my life working. I wore a navy blue linen blouse and a simple, elegant necklace. I walked slowly, with the kind of grace that comes from no longer being judged, only watched. A young receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I help you?" "I'd like to see some properties in the Chestnut Hill area. I'm looking for something quiet, with a garden, and plenty of natural light." She looked at me for a moment, hesitant. Her eyes dropped to my modest purse, then slowly rose to meet my face. I smiled back, calm, unrushed. "Of course I can call one of our agents. Did you happen to bring any proof of income?" I knew it was coming. The unspoken question, the doubt, the judgment. Before I could respond, a familiar voice sliced through the air. "I'll take care of her." I turned slowly, and there she was, Chloe Ramsey, Clara's niece, daughter of the ever-condescending Susan, dressed in a shimmering beige, suit, high heels, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Margaret? What a surprise," she said, approaching with fake warmth. "What are you doing here, looking for a cleaning gig?" She laughed to herself, clearly proud of her joke. The receptionist's eyes widened, visibly uncomfortable. "I'm buying a house," I replied firmly. "Oh, of course," she said, chuckling. "And I'm the next president of the United States." The room seemed to shrink around us. The silence was broken only by the faint clink of ice in coffee glasses nearby. Other clients glanced our way, unsure whose side to take. "Chloe," I said quietly, with a soft breath. You might want to choose your words carefully. Because today is a really bad day to underestimate me, she raised her eyebrow, smirking. Do you know how much a house costs around here? You probably don't even have enough for a month's rent. That's when I calmly opened my purse, pulled out a brown folder with my bank documents, and handed it to the receptionist. She flipped through it and stopped. Ms. Lowell, everything looks great. Your financial statements are here, and they're quite impressive. I can personally assist you right away. Chloe snatched the papers from the receptionist's hands, staring at the figure as if she'd just been punched. The color drained from her face. 8 million? This has to be fake. She used to work as a housekeeper. And it was. As a housekeeper that I learned more about dignity and honest work than you'll ever understand with all your arrogance, Chloe. Silence fell like a heavy curtain over the room. Then I added with cutting sweetness, Today I'm buying 2 homes, and if it's up to me, I'll do it with the youngest agent here, the one who treated me with respect from the very beginning, the young woman smiled, visibly moved. It would be an honor, ma'am, and it was. We toured 2 houses surrounded by magnolia trees, filled with sunlit kitchens and quiet libraries. In both, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I signed the contracts without hesitation. With every stroke of the pen, I wasn't just buying property, I was reclaiming my freedom. My dignity restored. Chloe remained in the shadow of her own shame, trying to mask her rage behind a strained smile. This won't last, Margaret, she muttered as I walked away. Money doesn't buy respect. I paused at the door, never turning back. But integrity buys peace. And that, my dear, is something you've never known. The days that followed were quiet. A good kind of quiet, clean, the kind that soothes, rather than suffocates. I spent my mornings walking along the veranda of my new home, a house with tall windows, vaulted ceilings, light-colored walls, and a lavender garden I had begun tending to with care. The sweet, herbal scent filled the air, mingling with the fresh wood smell of the new furniture. For the first time, there were no dishes waiting at night, no imposed schedules, no affection laced with expectations. But like all silence, it was eventually interrupted. An unexpected call. Clara. Margaret. Henry is devastated. He misses you. He's asking if he can come talk to you. My stomach turned. My first reaction was that old familiar feeling, guilt. The one every woman learns to carry from a young age. But it didn't last long. No. Clara, he can't. But please, he said he sent flowers. You didn't get them? I sighed. I did. They're in the trash. Silence on the other end. Margaret, that's cruel. I smiled, without warmth. No. Cruel was being called a burden. Cruel was being told I should become some old man's companion just to keep helping support your household. Cruel was being kicked out of the life I built with my own hands. A bouquet doesn't erase that. She tried to say something else, but I hung up. Not out of anger. Not in haste. Just with the calm certainty that if anyone still expected me to be the woman who quietly accepted everything, that woman no longer existed. A few days later, the front desk called me. A man was waiting outside. Take a guess. Henry. Mom, please. I just need to talk. That's all. I didn't go out, but I saw him on the security cameras, sitting on the curb, leaning against the white wall of my house. His face buried in his hands like a lost little boy. It was drizzling, and he didn't move. He stayed there for hours, trying to reach me through silence, through drama, through guilt. But nothing could pierce my walls anymore. The next morning, my lawyer called. He had seen the live streams. Margaret, your son is going viral with videos accusing you of abandonment. He's monetizing the story. My blood ran cold. He's exposing me? Yes, and twisting everything. Do you want to take legal action? I took a deep breath. I felt the pulse in my temples. Not yet. I want to handle this. My way. And that's when something inside me stirred. Maybe I wasn't an influencer or a public figure, but I had a voice, and I had a story. And maybe, just maybe, the world needed to hear more than just the version told by a man who was raised with love and chose selfishness anyway. I created my own account, typed the title of my first live stream, "The Woman He Claims Abandoned Him." Tiwi. Camera turned on, and there I was, barefaced, no makeup, wrinkles unhidden, soul exposed. I began to speak. My name is Margaret Lowell, and maybe you've heard a story where I'm the villain. Today, I'm here to tell you mine. And if it touches your heart, subscribe to this channel, because other women like me need to know they're not alone. I showed receipts, photos, old videos, and finally, the adoption certificate. Yes, because Henry wasn't my biological son. But he was the son I chose, the one I saved, the one I loved with everything I had, and the one now crucifying me for no longer letting myself be used. People listened, and they responded. In the comments, a wave of empathy from other mothers, from daughters, from women who had lived through similar stories and never had the courage to tell them. I cried, not from pain, but from relief. There, alone in front of a screen, I was heard for the first time. The morning after the live stream, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. Messages of support, interview invitations, even confessions from women who, like me, had been silenced for years. They weren't just numbers, they were voices, lives. Open wounds turned into words. Some of them said, "You spoke for me, Margaret. Thank you. I'm a retired nurse. They called me useless when I stopped working too. You're the mother many of us had, and lost." I cried alone, sitting on the cold kitchen floor, surrounded by the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of rain tapping against the window. It wasn't sadness. It was something new. A kind of silent recognition, like someone had finally seen the invisible scars I carried on my chest. But not everything was praise. 3 days later, Henry doubled down. He posted a video where he sobbed uncontrollably, saying I had used him, that I only adopted him for personal gain, that I traumatized him with pressure and a lack of affection. He said that now, with money, I didn't want a son, I wanted a trophy. The views skyrocketed. The internet turned into a courtroom. And as always, some people judged without knowing, pointed fingers without understanding, and branded me as the cold woman who traded her son for wealth. This time, I involved my attorney. Not out of revenge, but out of integrity. Henry had crossed a line. He wasn't just lying anymore. He was inciting people to destroy my reputation, spreading rumors, reducing me to a voiceless villain. Once the lawsuit was filed, the court's response came faster than I expected. They ordered the immediate removal of all related content, barred Henry from mentioning my name on social media, and fined him for defamation and emotional distress. And you know what he did? He vanished. Not quietly, but in collapse. A follower alerted me. They sent a link. I clicked it with a heavy heart. It was footage from a street in Toronto. A man sitting near a dumpster, eyes glazed over, clothes filthy. Unrecognizable, but it was him. Henry. The same boy I once held in my arms, now whispering incoherent words to no one. On camera, he laughed to himself, then sobbed like a child. His hands trembled. His face empty. I felt a coldness in my chest. But it wasn't anger or revenge. It was grief. Grief for who he might have been. For the person I tried to teach him he could become. Grief for myself, for having fought alone for so long, and for believing that love on its own could fix everything. That day, I walked to the piano in my living room, a gift I bought myself when I moved in. I sat down, took a deep breath, and played Evelyn's favorite piece, Clair de Lune. The notes filled the room with a gentle melancholy, and there, among the keys, I allowed myself to feel. I closed my eyes, and somewhere in the eye of music, I came to a quiet understanding. Not every child is a home. Sometimes the home must be built within us after every bond has broken. 6 months had passed. I lived that time like someone learning how to walk again. Each day was a quiet little victory. The first morning, I didn't check my phone hoping for an apology. The first cup of tea I drank slowly, without rush. The first afternoon I painted for hours without wondering if someone needed me. I moved to a small village on the shores of Lake Champlain in northern Vermont. A simple place with narrow streets and colorful houses, where the sky felt closer and neighbors greeted you with a sincere wave. No one there knew me as the ungrateful mother or the former employee of a wealthy family. I was just Margaret, the woman in the White House with the porch who planted lavender and played piano in the afternoons. My new home had light-colored walls, the constant scent of cinnamon and coffee, and an entire room just for books. The kitchen opened to the back garden, where hibiscus, mint, and rosemary grew freely. In the mornings, birds landed on the porch railing. At night, the sound of the lake's water lulled me to sleep with a peace I had never known. And I, who had spent my whole life asking for permission to exist, now felt whole. One day I received a letter. A brown envelope, no return address. I opened it gently. Inside was a single handwritten page. You don't owe me anything, but I had to say this. I saw everything. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up when I should have. May you be happy. May you find everything I didn't know how to give you. Clara. I read those words in silence more than once. I didn't cry, but I felt, deep in my chest, a soft ache of closure. She had understood, at least in the end, even if it was too late. I tucked the letter between the pages of a poetry book Evelyn had given me years ago. Not to remember the pain, but to mark something that had ended with dignity. Soon after, I decided to sell the 2 houses I'd bought in Boston. The market was strong. I earned nearly double what I had paid. I used part of the money to open a small art studio in Nîmes town. I taught painting and piano to children and retired women who, like me, had been forgotten by their families, but carried entire universes within them, just waiting to bloom. There, we were all women rediscovering who we were, for ourselves, not for the roles life had forced upon us. Every brushstroke, every note on the piano was a thread pulled from the soul, sewing back together the identity time had slowly unraveled. On a sunny Saturday, as one of my students, 72 years old, finished her first watercolor, she looked at me with teary eyes and said, "You know, Margaret, I thought my life was over, that I was just someone waiting to die, but when I pick up a paintbrush, I feel alive again." I smiled and held her hand. "That's because no one ever told us we could be reborn after 50, she laughed. And so, did I? Yes, we can, and we should. Sometimes people ask me if I have any regrets. If I had the chance, would I adopt Henry again? Would I do it all over, knowing how it ends? And I think about the sleepless nights, the fear of what was coming, the loneliness that swallowed me whole, even when I wasn't alone. I think about the smile of a sick little boy who found safety in my arms. And I think about the woman I became, forged in pain, but also in faith. And then I smile. No, I don't regret it. Because even though Henry turned his back on me, even though life took so much from me, I never lost the most important thing, myself. The truth is, for years, I confused love with sacrifice. I believed loving meant fading, serving until there was nothing left of me. But that's not what love is. Real love knows how to say enough. Real love knows how to protect itself too. And when I finally understood that, I discovered the power of starting over, not as someone going back to the beginning, but as someone moving forward, more whole than ever before. Today, I live in peace in my lakeside home. My days smell like fresh coffee and watercolor paint. My heart holds both silence and softness. And for the first time in my adult life, I belong to myself. The piano in my living room still plays Moonlight Sonata, but now with a new purpose, not to ease a wound, but to honor a quiet victory. The victory of having survived expectations, abandonment, injustice, and still being. Here, standing tall. Maybe you, listening to this story, know that pain. Maybe, like me, you've been forgotten, used, or diminished by those who should have loved you better. If that's the case, take a deep breath. You're still here. There's still time to rise. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve a new chapter, written by your own hand. And if this story spoke to your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Your presence here helps other women like us realize they are not alone, that there is light on the other side of pain. Because living to please others is exhausting. But living to honor yourself is freedom. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to bloom again.